Welcome everybody to this live stream. I hope that everybody is excited, is pumped, is ready to learn about using two monitors, and hopefully this will be very helpful for you. So I'm going to introduce Ashley in just a minute, but I wanted to do it in this format because I've been trying to make a video for a while about using two monitors, and I was just getting stuck on kind of how I wanted to do it. And then I thought, why not bring Ashley on, since she uses two monitors every day, not just for creating content like I do, but in her actual day-to-day tutor. So Ashley, if you want, thank you so much for being here. Why don't you introduce yourself in case any of the people here don't know you, who you are, what you're doing, and why the heck you decided to join this live stream.
Hey everyone, I'm Ashley. My business is called Your Reading Tutor, and I tutor primarily reading, but also a little bit of writing and spelling. I work with kids like K through 6 mostly, I would say. I've had a couple of outliers, of course, and I'm Sam's wife, his lovely assistant tonight. Okay, so Sam's got some questions for me, so I'm gonna give him back the sound.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much. So yeah, we've decided that we're going to do this in a bit of an interview style because I think that will be helpful. So, we're going to try it. We're going to see how it works, and hopefully we'll be good to go. So I'm going to ask Ashley a few questions. She's going to actually have some questions for me as well, because I'm going to talk more about the potential cons or the pitfalls that you might run into if you're trying to do a dual monitor or multi-monitor setup. But I think we're just going to jump right in. So the first question I have, Ashley, is you use two screens for tutoring now, but did you always?
Okay, I did not always use 2 screens. I definitely started out with 1 screen.
Okay. And when you first started out in the online tutoring business, we had a couple of older laptops. We were feeling like that technology wasn't very solid. And so I wanted to get a desktop PC that I knew I'd be able to upgrade. And so we got that to use along with obviously the camera and a microphone and whatever, the headset. But initially we only got one screen. So I know I was, advocating for two screens, but what actually convinced you to use two screens?
So, you actually convinced me to use 2 screens. That's the truth. He really did. I was I think it's just part of the way I was raised, but I'm very like, make do with what you have. Just starting out my business, I wasn't in the beginning, I didn't have a lot of students and I wasn't earning a tremendous amount and I didn't want to spend a lot of money. And in my head, everything related to computers is expensive. That's not actually true, and Sam can fill us in on that, and I'm sure he can give some suggestions for different monitors that are like more of a budget-friendly monitor versus something like a higher end option. If you were ever to see our office, like I think I probably have like the budget monitors and then Sam has like this massive monitor that I'm just like, "Oh my gosh." But that's why he's the tech guy, right? And I'm the tutor because to me it seemed like, "Oh, I don't need that. I'm fine. I'm fine the way I am now." But he convinced me to give it a shot.
Yeah, well, and the funny thing is that the reason I got the big monitor was because I was trying to go with a one monitor setup, but trying to use a big screen with the intention of, putting some of it on half and some of it on the other. And honestly, it just didn't work for me because when I was in the corporate world, I actually had a laptop and then two monitors in addition to that. So I had gotten used to a three screen workflow. And for a little while in our old house, when we were sharing a computer, we had a three screen setup as well, albeit on the desktop. Now, I'll talk a little bit about that and how we accomplished that in a little bit. Actually, that'll be part of the cons because that does require a little bit extra tech normally. But I had gotten very used to that. And so it was really hard for me to not only go back to one screen, but even to adjust back to two screens. But I wanted to ask you, Ashley, do you struggle when you have to go back to using just one screen? Like, for example, when you have to tutor on the laptop?
I don't know if struggle is the best word because again, it goes back to that like I'm just going to make it work kind of mentality, but I do think that I'm slower when I'm tutoring with like just on the laptop and I can only have the one screen because a big perk for me of using multiple screens is that I'm a very visual person. So I like to be able to see on the other screen like what's coming up and we're going to show you a little bit more of that in a minute. But so when I just have the one screen, I find that I'm just like slower. I feel like clunky now because I'm used to using two. I just have to mention if any, if you heard Sam say we had three screens at one point and you're like, that's insane. I don't know if it's insane. I think he needed it for what he was doing at his old job, but I did find three screens to be excessive for me. Two feels like just right, but don't feel like you need three for tutoring. I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. And to be honest, with our setup, we had to set our monitors all next to each other. We didn't have monitors that we could sort of stack. And so that became very difficult. I was using three, but honestly, I got along with two just fine. But, if you're crazy like me, sometimes you go and decide to do that. Oh, my next question is, what does your day-to-day workflow kind of look like that you would need two screens? I'm going to shift over to another scene here so you can actually see her setup and what she might do day to day.
So the screen that you can see with us on it is the main screen that I look at. So that's where I put my Zoom. So myself and my student, my webcam is on this first screen. This one. This is where I put Zoom. Okay? So that's like my main screen. And then the other one off to the side over there, this one is sort of what I consider like my holding space. So it's what I used, where I keep sort of like what's on deck. So on my main screen, I've got Zoom and I usually have the student's file pulled up so you can see over on this computer right now. This is actually my Google Drive. And up top, all those little rectangles, those are all my students. So typically I would have this over on the other screen. But anyway, so I'd like to keep stuff that's like on deck on the side screen and the stuff that we're currently using on the front screen. So that's one thing I do. The other thing I do, I'm just going to share. I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay. So this is a close reading packet passage that I was working with a student tonight. So they can see the passage there. And then on my other side screen over here, I would pull up the question. So I'm just going to click over there. So you might lose me for a minute.
You can see that on the one monitor she's got the Zoom call going, and on the other monitor she has that document. So I'll bring it back to Ashley here, but I just wanted to make a note of that.
Thanks. You can see I had the passage on this front screen, and that is the screen I'm sharing with the student. That's so they could see the passage. And then now over here on this screen, these are the questions from Raz Kids or Reading A to Z that go with that passage. So if I had one monitor, I would probably want to print those out because I would want them in front of me while the student sees the passage. I wouldn't want to have to click back and forth. And I wouldn't want to have to, like, I want to ask them the questions and have them still be able to see the passage. So I wouldn't necessarily want to put the questions, like, if I had the questions on my same monitor, I would have to stop screen sharing to click over to the questions and then click it back open. Like, I feel like it would be clunky for me. I wouldn't want it to be clunky for them. So I would probably deal with that by printing out the questions. But not having to print them saves paper and saves money and saves extra papers. Like, I've just recently started like not printing them because I had this epiphany that I could do this. Like, I could share the passage, have the questions on the other screen, and that would make it really easy. Yeah, so I use that. I would say those are the two big things I do with dual screens with students is one, I I keep stuff like on deck, and the other thing I do is have like the questions. I also use the Pride reading program for one of my students with dyslexia, and that has student work that I want to show. And then it also has a teacher guide that's digital. So I always have the teacher guide up on the monitor over here so that I can read from the teacher guide and still see them fine. So the third thing I wanted to show that I use daily, in terms of daily workflow when I'm with a student, is on this side monitor over here. I'll pull up my folders. So if I have a student who, let's say we're just reviewing their phonics patterns and they've just practiced, maybe they're going through and reading a list of words that have that pattern. And I know the next thing they're going to do is read a decodable passage, or maybe we're going to do like vowel fluency, whatever it is. So I'll pull this up over here. And so I have it ready. So then I can just quickly like click on the PDF I need for that student. So I guess I just feel like for me, it makes me more efficient and I can move from one thing to the next more quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. No, those were some really good points, and I'm glad that you brought that up, Ashley. I'm gonna hit a couple of more questions. A lot of monitors, newer monitors, like the big one that I have, has what's known as capability for a VESA or VESA mount, which means that you can basically get a mounting arm, like you might see on a TV that you put on your wall that can swivel out. You can do that with certain monitors as well. Now that adds a little bit of cost, obviously, and so that's something to consider. But because we were trying to save cost and our setup, we don't really need to have them mounted and stacked like that. That's what that is. But you could get a setup where you could mount your monitors, and I've seen lots of them online where people will have a big monitor, mostly for video editing, and some of the really pro streamers will as well. But that's what I meant by stacking. And dual monitors basically allow you to screen share one screen, yet be able to see and work with support resources on the other at the same time. Yes, exactly. So it's really designed to stop you from having to either minimize and open screens, because you can start to get lost. You can start clicking on the wrong thing. It can slow you down. And when you're teaching, especially with students that have attention issues, that can sometimes really break the flow. So, yes, the whole point is to avoid that. But I think we're going to shift gears here to content creation and more on Ashley's side, meaning what does she use her setup for other than just tutoring? Yeah, so Ashley, if you would, let's talk about sort of the other parts of your business beyond just tutoring and what you're doing that maybe is beneficial to have two.
Okay. Yeah. So, especially now that you've seen sort of what the setup looks like, you can kind of picture in your mind what I'm talking about it. But I mentioned earlier that I'm a very visual person, a visual learner. So, I found that I use the dual screens in a lot of my admin tasks. So let's say I get an email from a student and they need to reschedule. So I'm going to pull the email up on the main screen, the one that I'm like, that's straight in front of me. And then off to the side, I'll have my Google Calendar. And Sam and I both use Google Calendar for our business appointments as well as our children's like preschool and appointments, everything. We use it for everything. So I'll have that up on the side monitor. And that way, as I'm writing the email, I can be also looking at the calendar and I don't have to flip back and forth. It seems kind of silly to say out loud, but I think it's just because I'm so visual that it's like almost like I'll forget what the options are on the calendar, like while I'm writing the email. So I do that a lot. And also if like Sam and I were looking at some of like some budgeting and some finance and some income goals. So like on one screen, I would have like the report of income for the year, and then on the other screen, I might have my Stripe account up so I can see like what payments are coming in still. So any kind of like admin type tasks where I'm I need to see two things at once. But I would say so often my calendar lives on that side screen because we mentioned we homeschool, we have two kids, one does preschool, one does farm school, one does, it's like everybody's going in 10 different directions. And we have a really, I think, unique situation where we are constantly like switching hats. So like from this time to this time, I'm tutoring and Sam's homeschooling and Celia's out of the house. But then someone's got to get Celia. And also in the meantime, Sam has an appointment and now Michael needs to be doing this, So I feel like the calendar is so so important for our family and it totally lives on that side screen. The other thing I do for content creation, so right now I'm actually creating a course on Teachable. It's called Building Stronger Readers, and that's going to be launching next week. So I have been doing so many things. I have been using like Canva. So maybe if I'm scheduling posts, I might have Facebook up in front of me with the scheduler, and then off to the side, I have my Google Doc with my list of content. Or I'm using Facebook Lives right now for my pillar content. So I have an outline in my pillar content in a Google Doc on one side, and then on the other side, I have Canva open and I'm, dragging or I'm looking over at key points from my pillar content that I want to move over into Canva. And so again, it's a visual thing. Like I have the one over here that I sort of am storing, but the one I'm working on is like right in front of me. So I've been doing that a lot.
And I mean, I think you sort of intimated at this already, but do you feel like using two monitors makes these tasks easier and faster for you to accomplish?
I do. I definitely think that having two monitors makes these things easier for sure. And it's definitely faster. I just feel like clunky when I'm like trying to copy and paste from like and switch between screens. So I don't know if everyone knows this, and maybe this is silly to say, but like did you know that you can drag from one monitor onto the other? So, like, for example, if I have my files open on the one side, I can click on the image and drag it across the monitors and drop it into Canva. So, like, to me, that's just visually very satisfying to be able to just see it happening. Whereas if I just had the one monitor, then I would have to like either put them side by side, like put the screen side by side, which I can never really figure out to do. And then then it would make my screens really small, or you'd have to copy it and then paste it, or I don't even know. I would always end up like clicking the file and then it would make the other screen disappear and then I would need to like I don't know. So I don't know if you knew that, but that's a feature that I really love and I think it just like helps my process to be able to or even just see like okay, I'm copying this content here and then I'm moving it over to here, or I think that it helps. I don't know, it just gives you this feeling of like a bigger workspace. And if you're visual and you like need to kind of see how it's all piecing together, like I can see the files, I can see the text I'm moving, and that helps me a lot.
So I think what we're going to do is we're going to shift things a little bit, and Ashley has a few questions that she will ask me. This will kind of answer some of the questions as to what are some of the things that we might watch out for, some things that could potentially make it hard or impossible for you to go to a two monitor setup, or just some things that you might just be like, you know what, I'm good with what I got. I don't want to deal with that hassle. I'm not going to bother. So go ahead, Ashley.
Okay, sounds good. So you convinced me to use two laptops, which I'm definitely now, um, I'm definitely hooked. Like I will use one, or use the laptop if I have to. Like we had the power go out, and I took the Surface Pro to Sam's mom's, and I taught a class there, and it was fine, but it wasn't great. So I'm definitely hooked. Okay, so Sam, it's great. I love it. I'm hooked. But what are some of the problems that people could run into when they're trying to use two monitors?
Yeah. So the biggest one is honestly space and whether your computer can actually handle two monitors. One of the big things is you have the space. Some people have maybe a little corner desk or whatever. They've got their laptop set up. They've got maybe their document camera. They don't have room. And so if that's what your setup is right now, it might, if you're thinking about going to two monitors, it might require either a big desk, maybe a different location. maybe a desk with the mounting thing and specific monitors that cost a little bit more. So there can be that. Obviously, if your computer doesn't have a way of connecting a standard monitor to it, like the newer Apple laptops, they don't have HDMI ports on them. And so to connect them to dual monitors, you either have to get a Thunderbolt monitor, which is specific to Mac, which are more expensive, or some kind of dock that you could use that can then use those. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But those are the two main issues that you might run into. And then just the cost. Now, if you're working on a laptop, what I would recommend is that you buy one monitor. So you use your laptop monitor and your other monitor. Some people have found that difficult because of the different screen size. And frankly, most of the time your laptop is down like on your desk and your monitor is higher. So that can feel a little weird. And there are certainly ways where you can buy two monitors, keep your laptop closed, and use it almost like you would just like a desktop.
Okay. So interesting. So you kind of brought this up already, but what if you use a laptop? Can you still use two monitors?
Yes, you can always make it work with two monitors. I know we had an older laptop from 2012, but it was a Windows laptop and it had an HDMI port on it, which is pretty common. That's what most television sets have now, unless you're using a 4K monitor, in which case that might have like a display port. These are different types of cables, and that we'll talk about that in a minute. But a lot of the newer PC laptops will have the cables, but yeah, so you can. So you'll want to check the specific laptop that you have and see if, I mean, honestly, see if it's got the cable. On a thing, on like a Mac, especially if you have a MacBook Air or you have a newer MacBook Pros, you probably only have a Thunderbolt port and possibly a couple of USB ports. And so with that, it gets a little tricky, right? Because what are you going to do? If you want to go out and spend a lot of money on a Mac display, which will look fantastic, right? But you're going to spend a lot of money on it, you can set that up, connect it to your laptop, good to go. But if you don't want to do that, then there's a couple of options. One thing, we have a little dock that we use, but what that does is basically we plug that into our computer with a USB cable, and it plugs into the power outlet, right? And then on that dock, it has a number of ports. It's got, I think, two HDMI. It's got a VGA, which is what the older monitors use. And a lot of new computers don't even have VGA cables in. That's also important if you're thinking about using a television as your display. And then it's also got the ability for more USB ports. You could plug internet into it, an Ethernet cable, I should say. So if you have a laptop and you're starting to think about getting the things like wireless mouse, wireless keyboard, and maybe you want to have a monitor or two, get a dock for your computer. Now, we have the Surface Pro 4, and that one, again, it doesn't have a place for us to connect a monitor, a traditional external monitor. So they sell a dock, or we could use the one that we have here to, again, do all those things. So if we were working primarily from the laptop, I would definitely use that dock so that we could have more expandability. You can also go on Amazon, and there are sort of portable monitors. You can even get small ones that are USB. And so where that can be really useful is if you work, let's say you don't have a very big desk, or you have a non-traditional working space, or you're working kind of out and about, you go to somebody else's house, but maybe you still need two monitors for some reason. You can get like USB sort of mini monitors. They tend to be a little expensive for how big they are, but they're not a bad option. When it comes to a laptop, you might only have the HDMI port. Now, That's perfect, because if you've got that, you get one monitor that has an HDMI, and most monitors now, that's standard. And you just plug that in, and typically it will work. But if you're in a situation where you either want to use a laptop or you have a desktop computer, but maybe it doesn't have a dedicated graphics card, then you might be looking to have to do some upgrades. So depending on what you have, a lot of computers, desktop computers, will have, if they use an Intel processor, they'll have onboard graphics, which means that the motherboard that you have, that's the main sort of hub for your computer, will have a port that you can plug your monitor into, and it'll just work. It'll feed the signal. The systems that we have are Ryzen, and those don't have onboard graphics, and so I need a specific graphics card on my computer. So will you need a dedicated graphics card? Maybe, but probably not. But it depends on what you're trying to do, and if you want to use a lot of monitors. And then in terms of cables, most likely you're just going to need a HDMI. But on my setup, I told you guys before, I have the main display, which I have connected to my computer with a DisplayPort cable. And then I have my small old monitor. I think it's like 19 inches, and it's a VGA monitor, right? So back in the day when it had like the little, usually it was a blue cable and had two little pins on the side, and you would connect it to your computer, and then you'd screw in the little things. If anybody has seen those, that doesn't work on the graphics card. My graphics card is too new. It doesn't have VGA. So what that meant was I had to get an HDMI to VGA, so I could plug the VGA cable in from my monitor to this adapter, and then the adapter cable basically took the VGA and turned it into an HDMI cable, which I could then plug into my system. And furthermore, my graphics card only has one HDMI port, so you may need to look into cables and or cable extenders. So if you're ever in that situation and you're not sure, again, you can always reach out to me. Not to mention, like, YouTube is your friend, so YouTube will always be able to get the answers that you need. So thank you all so much for hanging in with us. We went over a lot of stuff, and I really hope that this was useful for you. Also, if you are interested in creating content and you want anything from setting up a YouTube channel, editing videos, content planning, having a sort of a coach to help you with all of this stuff, reach out to me. And if you all would do me a favor, go to SD Tech Tutorials on Facebook and maybe just give it a like. That would be helpful. Definitely would appreciate any support you have. But any topics that you guys are interested in, anything that you want either discussed or even maybe a live stream or video from me, post it in the chat, send me a message, do that whole thing. And I want to thank my lovely wife, Ashley, for jumping in for as long as she can, and obviously for taking care of our lovely daughter. So thanks, everyone. Take care.